What's up, everybody? Welcome back to the Rotoworld basketball show presented by NBC. I'm Dan Titus, joined with Raphielle Johnson and Noah Rubin. And the NBA Cup has officially concluded on Tuesday night. We have 8 teams advancing to the knockout round, also called the quarterfinals of the Emirates NBA Cup tournament. You guys listening can't see Noah rocking his Atlanta Hawks hat, but I see that he is proud that they have moved on. And we get to see Trae Young potentially get Ice Trae in the Garden, which should be pretty fun for any basketball spectator. But yeah, we're into week 7 of fantasy basketball, and it's going to be a tricky one for those playing in Yahoo. As a part of the Emirates NBA Cup, there was a big void in the schedule because we didn't know which teams would be advancing. Now we know. Then 22 teams are going to be sitting here at home watching. And there's going to be some schedule implications to this on the second part of week 7. So we'll talk about that in a bit. But first, just want to get your thoughts on the NBA Cup, the group play of it. At least some of the teams made it easy on us. I know that point differential is something that matters in terms of teams advancing in a wild card position, but just want to get your overall thoughts of the NBA Cup this year.
I really like it. I think my only complaint would be some of the court designs, but in terms of like early season competition, I really like it because look, nobody's going to catch up to king football. You know, the NFL is king in this country in terms of sports, but the NBA needed to do something to add some early season competitiveness because most of the conversations surrounding the league without this are really boring. Like you'd be talking about different teams and players, of course, but a lot of it would be framed around trades and whatnot and all that stuff. And for someone who just really enjoys the game of basketball and not like the rumor mill aspect of it, it's been really good to have competitive basketball to kind of focus on these few weeks here.
Yeah, I was going to say it feels like it's not something that's helping the casual fan enjoy the game more. I think it's something that's a lot for the players, like having this amount of money on the line, it makes them care more. And then also for the diehard fans that are going to be watching games regardless, just seeing the players take the game a little bit more seriously early on because it's a long 82-game season. We see a lot of players resting because the playoffs are the priority. But seeing a little bit more value placed on these early season games makes the basketball a little bit more enjoyable, which is, I don't know, pretty fun.
Yeah, and I think that, just looking at like Josh Hart, who was joking to some of his other teammates that like, yo, I'm doing this for the money too. I can buy a new watch here.
Yeah.
So like, I think
I don't care about the young guys.
Right. I think the financial implication certainly helps motivate players to want to be more competitive here. But I think there's also the element of what the structure of this format was, and point differential actually matters. So you saw the casual fan might be looking at the game. It's like, why is Tibbs still playing these guys in a blowout? But like it mattered. So I don't know. I hope that this is a test case for the NBA to maybe consider putting in point differential as a part of playoff contention and making that push, because I think we could see some of these players playing later into games and being more competitive throughout the season. But maybe that's just a pipe dream. I think there's a lot of injuries that we're still having to deal with here. We'll talk about a few more coming up, but just want to go back to the 8 teams that will be playing in the Emirates NBA Cup. It will be the Bucks. In the East, it will be the Bucks, the Knicks, the Hawks, and the Magic. And then in the West, we got the Thunder, the Rockets, the Warriors, and the Mavs. So pretty competitive group play going into the knockout round, single loss elimination. So from a fantasy perspective, though, as a part of this, 11 teams will only play one game from December 9th to December 15th. That is the second part of week 7. Those teams, the Sixers, the Charlotte Hornets, Miami Heat, Detroit Pistons, Bulls, Nuggets, Cavs, Brooklyn Nets, Sacramento Kings, Utah Jazz, and the Clippers. So if you have those players rostered, fringe guys, I mean, I'm pretty sure you can probably cut them if they only have one game. Maximum team that has the most games is the Knicks. So I think Miles Deuce McBride is someone that I would definitely be looking at on waivers. If he's available, pick him up now because that can help you in the second part of the week. But since transactions don't reset, it's going to be tricky for every fantasy manager. Got to manage accordingly and strategically. But let's talk about the NBA Cup for a second. I think the highlight of the night was the Dallas Mavericks comeback against the Memphis Grizzlies. Luka looked great. I don't think that's a surprise to anybody. But I want to talk about PJ Washington. I know we brought him up a few weeks ago and we're like, he's kind of a fringe guy. Yeah, the last 7 games, though, this man has been on a tear, 3rd round value in fantasy leagues. I think he's ranked 25th in 9 cat leagues over that span, averaging 17 points, 9 boards, 4 assists, and shooting over 60% from the field. Noah, do you think that PJ Washington's turned the corner here? And is this someone that you think can be relied upon in fantasy, seeing the way that he's playing right now? Or is this mainly just a byproduct of some of those injuries on the wing for the Dallas Mavericks?
I mean, I think it's a little bit of a combination. Like, he has been very, very good recently, but Najee Marshall's been out. And before that, Luka was out. And obviously, Luka's not directly taking his minutes, but he's been able to have a lot of his best games when Luka's not on the court, because he kind of moves up the pecking order in terms of priority on the offensive end. Like, just looking at, I'm using ppbstats.com, just the on-off splits with Luka on the court versus off the court. For PJ Washington, he's averaging almost 9 more points per 100 possessions when Luka's not on the floor versus a lot of those splits are in favor of him just being better when Luka's not on the court. And obviously it's not because, Luka's off the floor, now things are easier, because that's not the case, but he's just more of a priority. So, I mean, he's been playing well even with Luka back, and I expect that to like somewhat continue. But I think when they're fully healthy, like, his role is just very different. So those numbers aren't going to be quite as attractive as they have been over the past week or two.
Yeah, I think it's a matter. I need to see a larger sample size, especially with Luka back in the lineup. Because as Noah mentioned, a lot of those games occurred when Luka was out with the wrist injury. So I think PJ is certainly someone that he's looked good, but I don't know if I'm all the way back in on him as a fantasy option just yet. So,
and where do you stand on Spencer Dinwiddie? Because I mean, I think he was crucial in that NBA Cup game, and he's been pretty good for fantasy managers too. Over the last 2 weeks, he's been a 5th round value, but I think you could probably chalk that up to more injuries.
Yeah, I've never been the biggest Spencer Dinwiddie fantasy fan. Yeah, I'm a big fan of him, like, personally, in terms of like on-court play, but in terms of fantasy value, it's never been great. But yeah, I think he's someone else who's kind of benefited from those injuries. It'll be interesting to see if he's impacted by Klay Thompson's struggles. If Klay can't, his first game back last night, of course, but he was struggling even before that injury. So I think it'll be interesting to see what happens if Klay continues to struggle and Dinwiddie continues to perform as he has recently.
Yeah, that was an interesting one. If I can just add in real quick, because Quentin Grimes had been going off. Like, he had 20 points. I think it was 3 straight games. Klay's back. Boom, gets moved to the bench. Klay doesn't do anything. Quentin Grimes doesn't do anything. They both play 20 minutes. Spencer Dinwiddie makes an impact in his 24 minutes. So I don't think it'll be consistent, but I think this is more of just a thing where it's a really good for Dallas and kind of like doesn't really matter for fantasy managers, because having Spencer Dinwiddie come off the bench and be able to be another ball handler when Luka or Kyrie are out of the lineup or just on the bench, I think it's very helpful for them as a team. But I think, especially when Najee Marshall gets back and they are fully healthy, like, he's going to soak up a lot of bench minutes as well. So it's going to be, I think, too many mouths to feed for anybody to be providing fantasy value off the bench in Dallas.
Yeah. And in that game, I think it was pretty apparent down the stretch, Ja Morant took over, had a season high 31, accounted for 71% of their points. And it was like just glaring, like, yo, when is someone else going to step up for this Memphis Grizzlies team? So curious, Noah, should fantasy managers be panicking about Desmond Bane? Is it getting better? I had him as a buy low, and I think right now we're starting to see those minutes creep up. He's only been averaging 28 minutes over the course of the season, coming off that oblique injury. But do you see some positive developments here coming up for him?
Yeah, I'm pretty excited about him. I think the buy low period is starting to end. Obviously, he hasn't had some sort of big game that's going to make it just totally just like close. But the minutes thing is kind of just an overall frustration with Memphis this year. I don't think it's a Desmond Bane specific thing. Obviously, it was still a little limited as he's come back from the injury. But I mean, if you look at everybody's minutes, it's very, different game to game, and none of the stars are playing typical starter level minutes. So hasn't been ideal for fantasy, but this last game, 19, 3-3, 1-1, 2 threes, and 57% from the floor, 16 points a game before that. That's much better than 3 straight games with less than 10 points. And the minutes are starting to creep up. So even if he's playing 30 to 31 minutes, I mean, heck, even a minute or two less than that, I think he can still be very productive in 9-cat leagues. And I think he's starting to play to the level that we know he can.
Yeah, I think he'll be fine. The minutes will kind of work themselves out eventually. They played 11 last night. 10 played at least 11 minutes. I don't see that happening. Especially with Zach Edey eventually going to return probably by the weekend, if I'm not mistaken. So you're probably going to end up with like a solid 9-man rotation when it's all said and done. Just that some of these guys, like a Jay Huff, Scottie Pippen Jr., or Jalen Wells, they played so well early in the season that you didn't want to just pull the plug on them completely. But I think their minutes will kind of decrease as the season wears on. I think Desmond Bane and Jaren Jackson Jr., those guys will be fine.
Yeah, I'm with you there. And they're still missing Vince Williams Jr. I feel like that this Memphis team has just always found a way to do really well with the depth that they have. Scottie Pippen Jr. obviously had his moments with John Moran out. Just a really good basketball team that unfortunately can't really close, and their half-court offense still is in shambles. That seems to be the prevailing theme year over year, but I think that they'll figure it out as their main guys start to get healthy. Speaking of getting healthy, Aaron Gordon is back. He came back on Sunday night, but he returned with the starters on Tuesday, had a really good outing, 15 points, 9 boards with six assists. Jokic, once again, just outstanding. I mean, I think it's pretty much him and Giannis for MVP right now, just the way those two are playing. But Giannis, man, Jokic, career high 5 steals last night, 38, 10, and 6. But what does Gordon's return pretty much mean? It pretty much means the end of Peyton Watson, right? Like, there's not much we can do here. And I'm thinking streaming-wise, like, what does that even mean for Russ? Because I feel like Russ's numbers have kind of been dwindling, and he was fantasy relevant for a couple weeks, but I don't know. I feel like this might be the time to drop him too.
Yeah, I think it is. I guess with Watson, maybe you hold on for another game, just to see where Gordon's minutes go, but they're only going to increase, I believe. So if you want to drop him as well, that's fine. But Russ, yeah, for sure. Jamal Murray, he's up in the mid-30s in minutes now. They can share the court together, obviously, but I think at this point, maybe it for Russell Westbrook is like a bona fide fantasy option.
Yeah, I'm in the same boat there. I don't think Russ, he had a couple games where he was very productive and was like worth rostering, but overall, I think we've kind of been on the same page all season, is that he's not a guy that it's like you have to roster him, because he probably will have games here and there, even with everybody healthy, where he looks like, I don't want to say vintage Russ, but he's putting up really big numbers, and then he'll probably follow that up with, more of a recent year's Russ performance. But for Peyton Watson, they do have a back-to-back on Saturday and Sunday. Mm-hmm. There's definitely a chance that they're like, hey, let's not push it with Aaron Gordon. And that could be another start for Peyton Watson, in which case he might be worth streaming for that one game. But is it going to be against the Wizards or Hawks? I don't know. And the value with Watson isn't so tremendously vital that like you have to stream him just because he's starting. Like he was pretty solid as a starter. So, could be an option, but pretty much a drop at this point.
Yeah, I think that's a good point to hold him through the rest of this week, especially with your transactions being so limited. Yeah. You might as well hold on to that back-to-back and then drop him. If you have someone that could, maybe Miles McBride is out there, you can scoop him up for the following week. I think that would be a pretty savvy move. Mark Williams finally returned to play, man. Like, ooh. It was only 8 minutes, but we'll take it. 4 points, 3 boards, and 1 block in those 8 minutes. So, that's pretty effective on a per minute basis. But Nick Richards also had his best performance, 22 points, 14 boards, a pair of stocks, two assists. This looks like it's going to be shaping out to be a timeshare, Raph. But, I would still, are you still on Nick Richards here? Do you think Mark Williams will eventually ramp up, or like, how do you think this is going to shake out?
I kind of wonder if they're going to take an approach with Mark Williams similar to what we saw in Orlando with Jonathan Isaac, where he missed so much time. He's probably playing about like 15 minutes a night. So that's not going to be great for Williams' fantasy value, but I think it'll be really good for Nick Richards. And yeah, I'm definitely on the Nick Richards bandwagon right now. He's outstanding against Philadelphia, and the minutes are going to be there for him clearly. So yeah, Nick Richards all day here.
Yeah, I'm on board with that as well. I think you can go ahead and drop Moussa Diabate. I don't think that was, probably you already doing that when you saw that both of them were going to be back, both Mark Williams and Nick Richards. But yeah, honestly, it's probably a good thing that they're taking Mark Williams very, very slowly, given his, this is year 3, and he's dealt with so many injuries and long-term absences already that, sure, let's just take this thing slow. The season isn't going too well. LaMelo and Miles Bridges and Trey Mann are all out for an extended period of time. It's not like having Mark Williams available for 30 minutes a game is getting them into the postseason. Like, it's just not going well injury-wise. No need to rush him back. Let's not make things worse. So I think it's fine for the team. Obviously, it's a little bit annoying for fantasy. But I don't think that just because he played 9 minutes in his first game doesn't mean you drop him. Like, they'll probably get him up to a point where he can be fantasy relevant. But if you've been holding him in your IR or your IL, depending on your platform, all year anyway, just keep holding. I mean, see how it goes for a few weeks. If it's pretty clear that he's only going to play 10 to 15 minutes a game, then weigh your options because you can't stash him on a IL or IR spot at this point.
Yeah, I mean, if Nick Richards keeps on putting up 20 and 10s, it might force your hand to drop him sooner rather than later. But also curious just to see like where that goes in terms of like potential trade value. Maybe they put out Mark Williams a little bit more because the Charlotte Hornets certainly could offload some of those some players here for a veteran team that might need it, or a playoff contending team that might need it. Do you guys put any value behind Lonzo Ball using Snapchat and saying like, oh, might be teaming up with Lil Bro soon? I don't know. I'm just surprised that literally NBA players are still using Snapchat, but I guess I shouldn't be surprised considering that was what I thought too.
I was like, we're taking Snapchat stories and turning it into like news. Like right. that was what stuck out to me too. That was funny.
The discretion of Snapchat, I feel like probably, but I don't know, man. They still got the servers and the data. Like as much as they think that, like, oh, it's disappeared into the cloud. Like someone could resurrect that or hack it, I'm sure. But yeah, I don't know. I think that'd be pretty cool to see the Ball brothers play together at some point. But we don't know. We'll see how Chicago continues to run. They're still in that middle phase of like, oh, we're competing and players are playing well, but we're not good enough that we're actually going to be doing anything serious. So I don't know. There's going to be some conversation there going forward. But sidebar, since the Charlotte Hornets were playing against the Sixers, I just want to talk about the Sixers for a second because, damn, are they in trouble. I mean, LaMelo Ball didn't play, and they're still going down to the wire, requiring Maxey to make tough shots down the stretch. Joel Embiid is going to be missing tonight's contest. So is Paul George. I mean, if you saw Paul George's knee brace last night, you're not surprised that he's not playing on this back-to-back set. Are you worried as a Paul George manager? I mean, this was his best game by far, but like that was a big-ass knee brace, Raph. Like that's the same one that Joel Embiid is sporting. Like this can't be good.
Yeah, they're in trouble because they've dug themselves such a hole that they can't really afford to have those guys rest too much once they're available. So it's not my team, but I'm
wearing a Sonics hat today for a reason. I don't know when I'm going to be able to go back to the Philly one, man. I
think you're definitely concerned. I think if anything, if you have him rostered, maybe you try to use last night's performance as trade bait. He's not going to play tonight, but hey, look, here's what he's capable of when he's on the floor. I don't know if you're going to get like equal value for him, but I think you can get something in return. So I would be concerned, but only to the point where I'd start considering trade possibilities to move him on.
Yeah, Paul George wasn't a guy that I was really drafting in fantasy. I know there were some people that were pretty high on him. I don't have him in any leagues because, already the injury concerns, but I also just thought that the volume wasn't going to be there this year, which I didn't expect him to struggle the way he has. But it was good to see him have a good game. I think that's a positive. It doesn't have to be all negative surrounding Philly, even though it's mostly negative, but we can try and be a little positive here. He played well. That was good. Hopefully, he's sitting out the back-to-back, but maybe he'll just be available when it's not back-to-backs and put up good numbers. And I think that'll be huge for them. Tyrese Maxey struggled for most of that game and then kind of got some buckets late, but hey, they got to win. That I think it was, I remember writing this in a blurb. I think it's right. Their first win streak of the season. So, they're getting hot.
2 games, man. It's on and popping.
The 76ers are back.
I'll tell you what, if one thing they could do, just keep Jared McCain on the court. Like the lone bright spot that you have. Why is he not playing in the clutch?
Because Kyle Lowry has veteran experience.
Can't with that team. Can't with that team. Let's talk about another team that's on the struggle bus, the Los Angeles Lakers. A lot of conversation about whether LeBron James is cooked. I think it's more about the schedule that the NBA did not do them any service with. 5 games in 7 nights. Just a brutal stretch for two players, main guys, AD and LeBron, that have had their histories of, going down with injuries. And when you're playing that type of minutes, 35 plus, like something's going to happen. And I think they're both extremely tired right now. But do you think there is a buy low window? Are you guys interested? I'll start with you, Noah. Are you interested in a buy low window for LeBron James, knowing that we'll probably see some reduction in minutes per game to play the long haul here? And are you concerned about the scoring and the efficiency woes?
Have y'all seen the movie Thunderstruck?
Damn, that's an old one.
Yeah, that's old. I haven't seen it. Yeah.
So Kevin Durant loses his basketball powers.
Okay, yeah, no, all right, yeah.
Yeah,
no, I know.
I they have like he has the the stat graphics where it's like Kevin Durant is like 3 for 69 over the last 3 games or whatever like that. Mm-hmm. So it's not quite that bad, but it feels like that for LeBron. 0 for 19 from 3 over his last 4 games. I mean,
yuck.
I think one of my concerns, I think I mentioned this on this podcast, either preseason or like very early on, that I was expecting a reduction in minutes, a reduction in games played, and a reduction in usage from LeBron. That's why I wasn't super interested in drafting him. And none of that's really happened, but it's kind of taking a toll on this guy that turns 40 in a few weeks. Like, he's been superhuman, but they're asking him to do a lot. JJ Redick said the other night that, well, maybe it's not in our best interest for him to play every game because they do need him fresh. And in my opinion, that's what I think it is that his body is, as close to superhuman as it gets, but at some point everything starts to break down a little bit. So I think having lower minutes and lower games, like sitting back-to-backs or, like it was 5 games in 7 days, like having him sit out, like it'll be good for him. So as far as being a buy low, I mean, based on the numbers, if you're comparing it like that, then yeah, it's a buy low because the numbers have been horrendous. But I don't think he's a guy that I'm looking to move real assets for at this point, because if, they're able to rest him and lower his minutes just to get him to be more efficient, more effective, and that works for them as a team, that's not necessarily great for fantasy. So I think it's also difficult for the name value just to get a fair trade to the point where it's like, oh, you want to trade for LeBron James? Like, you have to give up a superstar just off name value. So I don't really see a buy low working out. I mean, if you're able to talk your way into it with somebody, then go for it, but not a guy that I'm super interested in acquiring right now.
Yeah, I think it would be difficult to get, a good buy low offer for him for the reason that Noah stated. The upcoming schedule may provide a little bit of relief because, them not advancing in the NBA Cup, they're going to have some time off from that game against Portland on Sunday. They don't play again until the following Friday. So that may help kind of refresh him a little bit, recharge the batteries, because you look at that roster between the injuries and guys just underperforming, there really hasn't been enough to help take some of the workload off of his plate. I think we've seen Anthony Davis slow down a little bit too recently. What those guys are being asked to do for that team, is it really sustainable given LeBron's age and AD's medical history? Thus far they've kind of avoided any significant injuries, but father time comes for us all.
Mm-hmm.
That it does. This is the lowest PER LeBron has had since his rookie season. He's 171st in 9-cat leagues over the last 2 weeks. That is, I don't think I've ever seen LeBron that low. That is astronomically low for him. So I think all good points. I think it will be tough to kind of move the name value with, commensurate with, someone that can actually put up the numbers that LeBron can. He's still averaging, 8 boards and 9 assists. So there is still some fantasy value to get from LeBron, especially in points leagues, but the efficiency is certainly a concern. Going to go from the basketball court to the pitch real quick, or the pitch to the links. Scotty Scheffler An all-star field of golfers hit the links in the Bahamas this week. Watch the Hero World Challenge Thursday through Saturday on the Golf Channel and Peacock, and check out the final round Sunday on NBC at 1:30 p.m. Eastern. Another player I want to talk about as we approach the NBA Cup, Franz Wagner. He's been a top 10 player over the last month, just been probably one of the better players in the NBA. I mean, we talked about it briefly, like playing at an all NBA level right now. Super efficient, low turnovers. He's getting 2.5 stocks a game. He screams a sell high here, but I want to get your take, Noah, first, because Paolo Banchero, we did see some positive reports on him. He was talking to Mark Spears on Anscape, saying that he's expecting to return, if he had the choice, a little bit before Christmas. Well, we're like a week or two away from Christmas, so that means he's probably going to be returning pretty soon. Does that concern you for Franz Wagner's value going forward?
I mean, a little bit, but I think it's something that makes him a difficult player to sell high on, because everybody that's paying attention knows that Paolo is going to be back within a few weeks and that Franz's numbers are probably going to take a hit. Not a massive hit. I don't think that'll happen, but he's not going to be a top 10 player in fantasy anymore. Just won't have the usage for it. But I still think he'll be better than he ever has been, even with Paolo back. And I think it's like what he did against the Knicks was incredibly impressive. Everybody, when they play every team, they know that Franz Wagner is the only guy that's like really creating a shot. He's doing pretty much everything on offense. And he still scored 30 against a team with two. I mean, Mikal Bridges hasn't been great this year, but at least OG Anunoby on the other team, like just an elite defender. So I think what Franz has done this year is just so impressive. So I'm not worried about Paolo coming back and all of a sudden like, oh my gosh, like I don't even want Franz on my team anymore. But yeah, like there's obviously only one basketball. He can't be a top 10 player when he's sharing the court with Paolo. But just another NBA Cup note with that game, I think they needed to win by like 37, was it, to advance the NBA Cup, and they were down like 35 in the
Oh, yeah, they had to lose. If they would have lost by 37 or more, they would have been out.
Excuse me, yeah. But because it mattered for them, they played their starters the whole game, which was helpful for Franz's numbers and for them to actually make it. So it's pretty cool.
Yeah, I think Franz will be fine. I don't know if he'll be like top 10 level, but if you think about it, with Paolo on the floor, I think what's Franz's fantasy floor? Like top 50? I know he struggled like that. He struggled a little bit more than that, but for him, struggling was like top 75. I think his fantasy value is going to be fine. I wouldn't even look to sell high. I would hold on to him because I think he's going to be too valuable to that group in terms of the scoring ability, the playmaking ability, the defense, everything he brings to the table going to be too valuable to that group for him to not be a focal point right now. So, yeah, and our producer notes that Franz is the betting favorite for most improved player. I can definitely see that, how well he's played without Paolo. Even when he's playing with Paolo, but early in the season, I thought he was an improved player. So I think he'll be fine. If I had him rostered, I don't, unfortunately. I'm holding on to him because he's going to be a clear cornerstone of fantasy rosters here.
Yeah, to some degree, I think the ascension of Franz is going to have Paolo having to defer a little bit more than maybe he was early in the season. Like I wouldn't be surprised if we see the shot volume continue for Franz Wagner to some degree. I mean, it's not going to be the extent of what he's getting right now, but I think it's going to be more than what we saw when Paolo was healthy. Franz Wagner only averaged 18 points, 4 boards, and 3 assists with Paolo in 5 games with Paolo this year. I mean, he was still getting up anywhere between like 13 shots a game. I think that would probably be around 15, 16, maybe even 17 when Paolo gets back. But yeah, I would be cool holding him because like where you drafted Franz Wagner, like right now he's exceeding expectations. His floor, he's always been pretty consistent. So I think you could expect a top 50 player at least for the rest of the season. And who knows, maybe it will take some time for Paolo to ramp up and be what he was before. I mean, this dude was dropping 50 balls before he got injured. So I think there will be some kind of concession for Paolo to kind of integrate because the Magic are rolling, man. They've been great with Franz. Another team that, had to make some changes to their starting lineup to to get a little more output, the Sacramento Kings. And Malik Monk just coming off 11 assists, 20 plus points in the NBA Cup. Is this believable, Raph? Like, do you think that Malik Monk can hold this for the rest? I mean, he was under 50% rostered in a lot of fantasy leagues coming into this week. But as a starter, do you have some optimism about him actually maintaining this level of performance for a long period of time?
I don't know if he can be this good. He's a top 20 player since returning from his ankle injury. I don't know if he can be that good, but I kind of feel like top 75, top 100 isn't outside of reason here. 12 assists, no turnovers last night. 12 assists were a career high for him. Also scored 17 points. He's been scoring extremely well since he came back, whether he's been starting or coming off the bench. So I think as part of this revamped starting lineup, he can definitely be a top 50 caliber player for the rest of the season. I'd be worried if I had Keegan Murray rostered, but I think Malik Monk, he's in a really good place right now.
Yeah, I think Malik Monk is a must roster player. You mentioned the about 50% roster. I think it was a little over when I was looking this morning. Yeah. But he should be rostered everywhere. But as far as I still think he's a sell high. Like, he's a guy that when you look at the numbers, Raph mentioned 16th over the past 2 weeks per Basketball Monster 9cat. Top 7th over his last 4 games, which is, he's been back for 5 games. But the number to me that really sticks out is obviously the assists. Last 4 games, averaging 9 assists per game. Do I think that can stick? No. I don't think that on a team with De'Aaron Fox, Domantas Sabonis, and DeMar DeRozan, that Malik Monk is going to consistently get 9 assists per game or anywhere near that. So it's been fun to see him do it the last few games, but I'm not banking on him being their primary playmaker. I think the points and threes can stick, the occasional steal, a couple rebounds just from being on the floor, those things can stick. But I don't think that he's all of a sudden one of the best playmakers in the league and is going to get all these assists. So his value is going to tank in comparison to what it has been recently, which again, top 20. I don't think anybody was expecting that, but I guess sell high if you can, but he should be a player that's rostered everywhere.
Yeah, I feel like you could just hold him. I get the sell high, just in terms of the volume of what he's getting as an assist guy. Mm-hmm. But again, where you drafted him at this point, I don't know where the average manager would be like, oh, let me go give you a top 65, 75 player per Malik Monk, right? I think you probably got to ride it out. But at the same time, I think this bodes well for his fantasy value. I'm just curious about where the Sacramento Kings are as a franchise, because they don't really look like they're going to be viable playoff contenders right now. The DeMar DeRozan experience has been inconsistent, and I don't know. I think Mike Brown might be playing for his job, and I don't know life after whether that plays in Malik Monk's favor or not. We'll see. They got a good win last night, but I think the rest were also on their side. Just ask Ime Udoka. He had some choice words for the refereeing last night. Another injury happened, unfortunately, in the NBA Cup. Kevin Durant sprained his ankle. He's going to be reevaluated in a week. Raph, where are you going to in terms of waivers, if anyone, to kind of shoulder the load for Durant while he's going to be out? Royce O'Neal, maybe? How do you feel?
Not too good, to be honest with you. I know Royce O'Neal was really good as a streaming option earlier this season, but I think he's kind of tailed off. Grayson Allen was the replacement in the lineup to start the second half. So if you need points and 3-pointers, that's probably where you're going to look here. But I don't know, when you have 2 of Phoenix's big 3 on the floor, it's really difficult for someone to really separate themselves as a clear-cut streaming option.
Yeah, Grayson Allen is the guy to go to. He was really good in fantasy last year from hitting threes, and he didn't hit any last night. But with Durant out, I'd imagine he's the guy that starts and has more opportunity to knock down some threes and hopefully get a couple other things here and there.
Yeah, it's pretty interesting how the schedule is working out in his favor. I wouldn't be surprised if we didn't see him just rest, because they play Portland and Utah next week at the tail end of the week. So, do you really need Durant for those 2 games. So I think we would probably see him in week 8, and not a huge fantasy boom, but like I agree, maybe Grayson Allen might be the streamer for those 2 games if you need some threes and scoring later on. Coby White, has he been ruled out for Wednesday night? I saw he was at least questionable coming in. Yeah, so he's been out. Anybody from the Bulls that interests you? I think this is a good time to talk about rookies, and Matas Buzelis coming off his 20-point performance. Noah, is this a guy that you're kind of on, that's on your watch list in terms of opportunity? The trade deadline is opening up very soon. Perhaps we see him get more minutes. I mean, I think in the time that he's actually played, he's been pretty effective. So I don't know, he's a guy that I've definitely been eyeing in terms of like a eventually long-term pickup.
Yeah, I think he'll have, I mean, with Coby White out, he played 22 minutes in their last game. Julian Phillips got the start, but Matas Buzelis played more and played better. And with Coby White out, who knows, maybe they make the swap and start Buzelis, but I don't think that necessarily means that he's going to be worthy of a roster spot at this point. He's had a couple other games where he's played, 20 plus 25 minutes, and he just hasn't been very good, which isn't surprising for an incredibly young rookie that's, like a very raw player. But I think they are a team that, may finally make some trades at the trade deadline and open up a ton of minutes for him over the final 2 months. So I think we're looking at more of a silly season hero and a very good dynasty asset, as opposed to a guy that I'm looking to stream in the short term. But the upside's obviously there. So we'll see. It's just kind of risky to me.
Yeah, he remains a stash guy for me. If you have the space to hold him until February or March, see where the Bulls are then, that's fine. But right now, I would need to see a bit more in terms of the productivity and the consistency before making that move in a lot of leagues.
And Vooch, I mean, obviously he's a sell high. He's been all season, but I mean, at this point, do you have any confidence in holding him, knowing that he could be, traded to another team? I mean, you can't really play on, on the circumstance and possibilities, but I think it's a pretty foregone conclusion that he's probably going to be traded.
Yeah, I think we'll see where he lands, and how big of a need that team has for a center if he gets moved. But it does feel like he may have the higher value in terms of potential trade, in terms of teams being able to work something out with Chicago than, say, Zach LaVine, just because of the size of his remaining contract. So, yeah, I think you hold on to Vooch and kind of see where that takes you. I don't think there's another good center on that roster. Of course, you have Jaylen Smith in the backup role, but he hasn't really been all that productive. So, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it is a pretty obvious sell high, partially because we all expect him to be traded, but also because he's just shooting it like so good that there's just no way that this sticks for the whole year. So to this point, 47.6% from 3 on almost 5 attempts. Like last year, he shot 29%. And then the 2-point percentage is up to 63%. Both those are career highs. So like he's just shooting it at such a ridiculously high rate. And I think it's kind of been said for a while that he's a sell high. And maybe it just pisses people off enough. They're like, how do you keep calling him a sell high? Like he's just keeps playing good that they're like, fine, you know what? Like I'm gonna buy, I'm gonna make a trade for Vooch, and then gives whoever has him the chance to sell high a little bit, just because I think the trade is going to be more of the factor, but I can't confidently say that he's going to continue to shoot the ball this well. And at some point, it's just going to regress a little bit.
Yeah, I'm kind of surprised. I was looking at a Shot Creator, really cool little app to assess players, and you get video with it. But he leads the league in floaters per game and floater percentage, 71%. And I was going back, I was like, damn, I'm probably going to tweet about it because I don't tweet much, but I thought this was cool. I mean, I didn't know that Vooch really had a float game like that. And like the highest before that was like 58% in his career. So clearly something's working, and he figured out that he could do that. But also don't know how believable that is to do that for the course of the season. If, the best one he ever did was 58% before that. But Wizards, Malcolm Brogdon's hurt again. Surprise to no one. Bub Carrington, under rostered. He in starts this year, averaging 11 points, 10 points, 5 boards, and 5 assists. Is this someone that you're looking to add, Raph, in wake of Brogdon's injury?
Absolutely. Told people to stay patient. I think when Brogdon was starting, it's like there was some anger from fantasy managers, some dismay. Stay patient. This team is bad. They're going to let the young guys continue to play through their issues. And now you have an injury. Brogdon's hurt. Corey Kispert was hurt during the same game last night, as was Keyshawn George. So there's really no reason for Bub Carrington to not get back well into the 30s in terms of minutes played. Probably going to take a hit in the field goal percentage, but the other things he brings to the table make him well worth adding right now.
Yeah, Bub's going to be back starting, playing 30-plus minutes, like you said. Like, pick him up if he got dropped.
How are we feeling about Darius Garland, another guy that's been screaming sell high all year? He went out with a concussion. I think he's had a concussion before. So I don't know if there's any lingering effects there, past history of it. But I'm not overly concerned. But no, is there anybody you'd pick up in Wake if Darius Garland were to miss the next handful of games?
Oh, yeah, definitely adding Ty Jerome. He's been fantastic this season, even in a pretty limited role. And I think a lot of that is 9-cat value looks really good because he's just been so freaking efficient and gotten, pretty good steal numbers. But him in a starting role, we saw him start twice this year. He had 24 points, 8 assists, and 4 threes in one of them, then 29 points and 7 threes in another. So, yeah, if he's going to start in their next game or gets a couple starts, definitely a guy that I'm looking to stream.
Yeah, no argument here. Maybe you keep an eye on Karis LeVert in deeper leagues coming off the bench, but yeah, I think Ty Jerome's going to be the guy to target here.
Yeah, I agree with that. I feel like I'd rather have. Oh, that's a good question. Thanks for producer Adam for hitting us up with this. Raph, who would you prefer, Bub Carrington or Ty Jerome?
Right now, Ty. Just he's a more efficient basketball player. And I think his experience in fitting into that lineup where he's going to have opportunities to score based off playing off of a Donovan Mitchell, playing off of an Evan Mobley and Jared Allen. So I think the circumstances make him a better pickup right now.
Yeah, I think short term it is Ty Jerome, but I'd probably rather add Bub just off the sense that the long-term value is going to be there. Because, in say Darius Garland misses 3 games, when he comes back, Ty Jerome goes back to a reserve role. And Bub Carrington is probably still starting for most of the rest of the year, at least playing heavy minutes. So I'd rather, and if I'm having to choose, I'd rather add Bub. But if you're just looking for a short-term guy, then yeah, Ty Jerome.
Team Bub. And it's really just based off the schedule. The Cleveland Cavaliers, I said at the top, they play one game next week. So I feel like, not that the Wizards play that much more, but hey, it's one more game. So yeah, I think I lean Bub, but I think I lean Bub just for the long term. As Noah stated. Let's talk about some football for a second because it's an AFC West showdown between Justin Herbert and Patrick Mahomes in Kansas City this Sunday night. Coverage of the matchup with major playoff implications begins at 7 p.m. Eastern, only on NBC and Peacock. Yeah, that's going to be a good one. A lot of value there in the AFC West. But let's talk about Jaylen Wells for a second because we touched on the Memphis Grizzlies and obviously Desmond Bane seeing his minutes ramp up a little bit. Marcus Smart moving back to the bench. But I think it's been a surprise of how well Jaylen Wells has been playing. He really wasn't on anyone's rookie report, to begin the season. And he's just been quietly doing his thing. The month of November, he averaged 13 points. Coming to 2 games in December, he's averaging 12. Shooting really efficiently from the field, 49% over that span. And he's been a knockdown 3-point shooter. Is this somebody, Raph, that you think could have staying power in fantasy, or is this a byproduct of, hey, no Vince Williams Jr., some of the wing depth has been injured, so it's just given the opportunity for the Rook. But I don't know. He looks pretty damn good. Yeah,
he's looked good, I think. I'd like to see a bit more in terms of defensive production. I think that would really boost his fantasy value. But, for now, I think he's fine. I'm not expecting too much rest of the season because he's on a 2-way deal. So he's limited to 50 games he can be active for. And
that's crazy.
A quick check. I believe he's played 21. He's already played 22. So they can make a change to his contract, get him on a standard deal. But when you have Vince Williams Jr., you have G.G. Jackson, these guys eventually going to be back and healthy. I just wonder what the long-term viability is for Jaylen Wells for the remainder of the season. But he certainly helped himself out, in terms of his NBA future with the way he's played.
Yeah, I think that's definitely more true than what he can do in fantasy. Like, this guy has proven that he is going to be an NBA player for a long time and be a very productive guy. Memphis just keeps finding these guys that are going in the second round or very late in drafts and turning them into significantly better than that. But he gets you some threes, and that's really it as far as what he's doing in category leagues. So I don't think that he's a standard league guy.
Yeah, I think you'd have to be in like a 14-team league to consider it right now, and that's a very short window with Memphis Grizzlies. The complementary players getting a little bit healthy, but he's definitely earned himself a contract, and I think Memphis would be silly to not guarantee that contract, because if you let him go on the open streets, I'm sure he'll have some suitors. We didn't really talk about the Warriors yet, but I just think it's worth noting because Draymond Green is going to get an MRI later today. We haven't, I guess, as of 12 Pacific, we haven't seen an update yet, but he's concerned about his calf, and couldn't help but notice at the end of that game versus the Nuggets that they just don't have anybody to help Steph right now. But Buddy Hield is definitely fading. I think it was really notable that Steve Kerr was calling out Brandon Podziemski by name for his notable mistakes down the stretch. Do you think that this is something that Podziemski can recover from? I mean, he's only shooting 29% from the 3-point line. Might even be worse than that. It might be 21, one of those 20s, somewhere in the 20s. Hasn't played particularly well, but is there anybody that can really benefit playing with Steph right now from a fantasy perspective? Or is this just like, hey, just avoid it, start Kuminga, Andrew Wiggins is a fringe starter in 12-team leagues, and that's pretty much it. Where do you stand on it, Noah?
I think Steve Kerr just makes it very frustrating because he doesn't play anybody a significant amount of minutes to the point where it's like he's the clear streamer. Like, Jonathan Kuminga did play 29 minutes last night with Draymond out, but before that, it just feels like a lot of these guys and the rest of the team pretty much was between 15 and 20, maybe a little over minutes. So I think you do have to stream in Kuminga. He was pretty good, but he wasn't great. Had a pretty bad shot down the stretch that kind of gave the Nuggets. I think it was he went up for the dunk and Jamal Murray blocked him.
Yeah, that was a good play.
And then I think he had another drive kind of late in that game that was like, if you just waited half a second, Steph was coming around a screen at the top and you could have hit him there, but took a bad shot. So as far as fantasy, yeah, I think Kuminga is probably the main guy, but I mean, it isn't looking good for the Warriors. I think they've lost 5 in a row now, and a lot of these guys that they were hoping or had high hopes for this year just haven't looked very good. You mentioned Podziemski. I think Steve Kerr called him out from a place of, hey, we really need you to be better because we believe in you, and not like you suck, stop it. So hopefully, I hope that's what he meant. Who knows? But
that's how I took it too. It was like, hey, because Draymond said it first like a week ago. He was like, yo, man, we just need you to play the way that you play. Stop doing too much. Mm-hmm. You're overthinking. Much like Steve Kerr was like, bro, like, we just need you to be you. Stop throwing these, lob passes all crazy, trying to create a viral highlight. Just play within your means. And hopefully he hears him.
Yeah, coming out of training camp, the talk was like, so many guys played well that you really couldn't trim down the rotation. It feels like they're hoping for some sense of like separation to occur during the season, and it hasn't happened. So they're still in this position where they're playing 11, 12 guys a night, and they only played 10 last night. So I guess a little bit of improvement there, but no one's really like stepped up and separated themselves. And Stephen Curry, as great as he's been throughout his career, he hasn't been asked to do as much scoring, partially because there's so many mouths to feed in that rotation right now. So maybe Steve Kerr's just going to have to bite the bullet and make a decision and pull someone out of the rotation entirely. But it's getting to that point because it feels like there's so many different bodies in the rotation that guys don't really know where they can be their best at. And that may be negatively impacting the fantasy values of a bunch of these guys.
Definitely making it a challenge. In terms of waiver pickups for the rest of the week, like obviously we're going into a 2-week period here. So we're going to be talking about this next week, so I'm sure we'll have some more recommendations. But I think it's notable there are at least 10 teams that play 5 games from today until the end of December 15th. I just wanted to call out the Utah Jazz, the Brooklyn Nets, the Clippers, and the Detroit Pistons as the only teams to play 3 or less games over the course of this period. So those are the teams I would probably be less interested, specifically the Detroit Pistons, because they play against Boston tonight. They play the Knicks on Sunday, and then they play Boston again on Thursday. That's just a brutal stretch of games. And also to the Clippers, they play the Timberwolves tonight, and then they play the Houston Rockets on Sunday, and then don't play again until Friday the following week against Denver. So, yeah, definitely not feeling those teams from a streaming perspective. I already called out Miles McBride. The Spurs play 5 games. I really like their schedule. They got Chicago on Thursday, back-to-back with Sacramento. That's a great matchup. And then they got Sunday. They got the Pelicans. So I would be looking at Julian Champagnie. Think he still has some value. If you want to go deeper, maybe Keldon Johnson. But I think we'll start to see Devin Vassell continue to ramp up here. He's still coming off the bench, but he looked really good last night. So I would expect that he would start to get more minutes. If Jeremy Sohan is somehow out there, pick him up because he is Aaron Gordon light right now. But yeah, I want to get your thoughts, Noah. Who are you picking up? Any guys that you have for the rest of the week?
Yeah, aside from a few of the guys we've mentioned already, Oso Ighodaro from Phoenix, who started at center with Nurkic out. He's supposed to miss, I think it was
at least 1 week. Yeah.
Okay, so it was a week. So that's a few starts for him. He was semi-productive, played 31 minutes. So I think he's a guy that is a pretty good opportunity for a rookie. And then another rookie, Yves Missi, somehow still not rostered everywhere. Please change that so that I can stop talking about it, so that we can stop writing about it. Like this is a Sander League guy. Like what are we doing? And then one more like deeper cut here, Dariq Whitehead, who I think it was his 5th NBA game or something like that, or maybe it was his appearance this season because he's just been so injured, and he was so injured in college. But in their last game, he had 18 points and 6 threes. I think. What was it like it was either it was like 1-2-1-2 or 2-1-2-1, but some other like stats across the board. Played with some guys out, so I'm hoping that the Nets are kind of like, hey, like this guy that used to be the number 1 player in the country when he was in high school that has been incredibly injured for the past 3 years. He had a really good game. Let's give him more minutes and see what we have, because had he not got hurt, he probably would have been a top 5 pick. So I'm more of a keep an eye on him than like a must pick up at this point. But I'm pretty excited to see what they did with him.
I'm going to throw Peyton Pritchard back out there. 51% rostered. I like Boston's schedule. I like Boston's schedule. 51? Starting tonight with Detroit. Yep, 51%.
Crazy.
It's insane.
Yeah, starting with Detroit tonight, they have 5 more games the remainder of Week 7. They played Detroit twice and at Washington to end the Week 7, the expanded Week 7. So there are going to be some opportunities for him to stream. They also have a back-to-back in this stretch. So Al Horford, Kristaps Porzingis, they're probably going to be down for at least one of those games. Drew Holiday's been a bit banged up recently as well. So Peyton Pritchard, Sam Hauser, you can talk me into him as well. But I think Peyton Pritchard's the guy I'd definitely be aiming for in terms of adding from the waiver wire.
Yeah, I'll just throw one more name out there, Nickeil Alexander-Walker. The Timberwolves played 5 games. Going to be some tough matchups, but he's just been extremely efficient. He's contributing across categories. So deep cut probably as well in 12-team leagues. I have him in one spot, and I haven't dropped him yet. But, we'll see how the rest of Week 7 pans out. That'll do it for the Rotoworld Basketball Show. We'll see you next week. We'll be discussing the rest of Week 7 going into Week 8. See ya.